John Riley, I'll have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. When I got to America, it was my duty to go. Enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico. And it was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. And there amidst all these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied, so we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We marched neath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with Erin Goldbra, bright with the harp and the shamrock, and Libertad per Republica. Just 50 years after Wolfstone, 5,000 miles away, the Yanks called us a legion of strangers, and they can talk as they may. But from Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied, so we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in 5 major battles. Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside in the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied, so we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied, so we formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion, and we fought on the Mexican side.
Howdy, folks. Welcome to Redneck Gone Green. I'm your host, David Cobb, and I am the redneck, and you bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to convince you to do it too. But I want to be clear. I'm the kind of fellow who believes in doing electoral politics without becoming an electoral fetishist. And for this show, I really want to underscore that. In other words, so many people who want social change in this country, the United States, have this opinion that either, oh my God, elections are where we elect people who make decisions. That's where it's really at. And movement stuff, that's, whatever. But really, elections are what really matters, right? So that's one category. The other category of people say, are you kidding? If elections could change anything, they'd make it illegal. Elections are bullshit. Don't even waste your time. Social movements are the only thing that has ever really made significant systemic transformational change. Here's the thing, y'all. They're both right, and therefore they're both wrong. It is not the either or binary that so many people talk about. It has to be both and, which is to say, how do you do electoral politics with clarity that you're doing it for transformational change, knowing that the way our current culture works, it tries to denigrate, insult, and otherwise disempower us. So trying to get elected is a challenge in and of itself. And then once you get elected, how the hell do you govern in a transformational way? And that's why I think this show is going to be fantastic. And it's really my pleasure to remind listeners and viewers, first of all, like, share, subscribe. We're getting larger, stronger, better organized every week, and we want you to be part of this community. You also will recognize Jackrabbit, who typically comes on a little bit. You mostly hear his voice. Every now and then he'll be inspired to come and join us. There is that handsome fella. Jackrabbit is actually going to be co-hosting this show because he has a particular political relationship with our guest. So I'm going to turn it over to Jackrabbit and let Jackrabbit introduce Kate.
Thanks, David. Thank you so much. So so I'm really excited about today's show. I really can't wait to talk to Kate. I originally found out about Barcelona EnComu through friends of mine who I knew through Occupy Wall Street. And it was really exciting to hear about because it sounded to me like from what I had heard, because they actually gave a presentation to other folks that, we were part of our like community, our little Occupy Wall Street community. And they were talking about this organization in Spain that had actually flown them to Barcelona to be there during these elections. And it just sounded really amazing. It was like this kind of like the actual coming together of this idea of popular democracy, really engaging with the public, having the public be directly involved and engaged with the actual governance of their communities. And these people were going into communities and speaking to people and followed through with that and with these leftist ideas, and actually won. They were actually successful in Barcelona. I'm not exactly sure what the year is. I think it was 2015. They actually elected a mayor who was running on this platform of like real democracy, really real engagement with the public in a very real way. And the person who got elected, her name was Colau, and she had been a housing activist who had been literally arrested by the cops just days before she won the election. I mean, it was just a very it was like a story, it was like a fantasy story that leftists tell their children when they're going to bed. It was that kind of thing. How cool it sounded, and so we actually, I became more involved and very excited about the whole concept. And we ended up having a meeting. It was like I believe that there was, I can't remember right now, but I believe it was like a kind of a national gathering that happened a couple of years later, where we brought people in to talk about. We called it Fearless Cities. It was like this movement to kind of try and get municipalism is what it was called, municipalism, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But to have it have a foothold in the States, and so kind of like and I met Kate in person at this gathering and stuff. So that was really great. So anyway, without further ado, that's kind of my intro to why I know about this stuff and how excited I am about it. And so I'm going to introduce Kate Shea-Baird, who is an activist in Barcelona En Comú since 2014. She is active in international municipalist activism, also known as Fearless Cities, and she was on the executive team of the organization from 2017 to 2021. So hi, Kate, welcome.
Hi, lovely to be here.
It's great to have you. It's really great to see you. So Kate, do you want to just kind of introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are and what you're doing?
Yeah, well, I should say that Barcelona En Comú is no longer governing Barcelona since this May, because we lost our third term attempt at governing. So I'm still in a kind of mourning processing stage. But having participated in it is one of the most exciting things in my life. As you were saying earlier, it was a complete dream come true. It was the first time I'd ever participated in any kind of electoral politics. I had become very disillusioned from electoral politics, and I had the luck that the first time I actually got involved, we won the election with one of the most radical platforms in Europe. So yeah, it was a complete adventure, and I'm still trying to, I guess, take the lessons from it and work out what they are. And I hope that our conversation today will help me to do that, because sometimes, you need other people to talk it through to, really tease out what the lessons can be for other movements.
Well,
So
Kate,
go,
David, go. Kate, you go.
So listen, Kate, I will tell you, I reckon our audience, much of our audience will be, if at all, only very minimally or marginally familiar with either Barcelona, the election itself, much less the Indignados movement and sort of where it came from. So I'm going to invite you to sort of set the stage a little bit about what happened leading up to that election, what made unapologetic transformational thinkers think, oh, we could actually govern this city and we should try to govern this city, right? Like, I think that for a lot of our audience, for a major urban center like Barcelona, to think about people who share our values taking power is almost fantastical, right? So I'm going to invite you to say, give us a little context before we get into the details of what happened. Set a little context for us.
Sure. Okay, so I think it's worth noting that historically, Barcelona has been a radical city. It's got a strong anarchist history, a Republican in the sense of non-monarchy tradition, a workers' cooperative, a union tradition. So that's always been there, and it hasn't been lost. It's a city that's very kind of socially engaged. And then what happened was, after the 2008 financial crisis, Spain went into economic collapse, austerity. There was a huge wave of evictions all over the country. And so new social movements formed, particularly the Platform for People Affected by Mortgages, which is where Colau was an activist, which was a social movement that took direct action to stop evictions just by getting local people to stand in front of the doors of the apartments so that the police couldn't get in and evict people. And then, of course, there was our sister version of Occupy, which is where that connection comes from, which was the Indignados movement in 2011, which was the occupation of public squares across Spain, with people calling for real democracy. And that was also very tied in, not just with the financial crisis, but also with a kind of corruption crisis in Spain, where you had this two-party system where you had these career politicians who were in office for 20, 30 years, who were, they're financed by big business and were completely out of touch with ordinary people. And so in Barcelona specifically, in those years between, I guess, 2010 and 2014, there was huge social movement activity and a lot of, I guess, victories from the street, particularly in stopping evictions. And in changing the kind of political discourse. And around that time, it was like a glass ceiling was reached, right? So you have such powerful social movements, but they've reached a point where it was like, there's only so much we can do from outside of the institutions. And at that point, there was a debate about, well, if we're going to stand for election, should we do it at national level or local level? And in the end, the decision was made to stand at local level, partly because it was seen as more winnable, and partly because of the, I guess, participatory potential that you have at that level. So different people from social movements and also from some of the small green and left parties in Barcelona here, there's an electoral system that's slightly more favorable to small parties than in the US, though not particularly, came together. And the idea was, okay, popular unity, like let's get everyone to come together, build this new organization that was called Barcelona En Comú, which means something like Barcelona in common or together or something like that, and stand for election. And we had Ada Colau, who was the spokeswoman for the housing movement, who is a great communicator, was very well known because she'd gone to the Spanish Congress as a witness in a kind of inquiry or a committee. There was some sort of committee meeting about housing, and she'd done this speech that went viral over the internet and on TV, and everyone knew who she was. And so that combination of a kind of mass movement from below and this very strong charismatic leadership meant that from the organization being formed in 2014 and coming from nowhere, we won the election in 2015. We were the most voted for party. And I guess just to summarize as well, that apart from having a kind of social justice, green, participatory kind of manifesto, there was also a very strong part of it was like changing the way of doing politics, not just the content of public policy. So we had a code of ethics that, well, still have, which is kind of dealing with more of like the indignados kind of corruption side of the political crisis. So that had term limits, salary limits for elected officials, obviously rules on donors, no donations from banks and big businesses, and transparency. And we can go into that in more detail. But it was that combination of like, let's change the way we're doing politics and let's change the political agenda. Yeah.
So, Kate, can I ask you about that? So, one of the things I'm really very curious about here is you were talking about, you made it sound as though who was making these decisions like early on when you were like, well, let's work at the local level. That's what I'm really intrigued by, right? I mean, like, was there a national discussion that was happening among activists, among this group that had grown over those years?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that I was I wasn't involved until the public presentation of the movement, which was in summer of 2014. So in the months before that, from what I've been told, it was very much like discussions, informal discussions between people, mostly from the housing movement and the Indignados movement. And it was kind of like an informal, it was that stage where you need like a people who are going to, take the decisions, even though there's no structure to actually make those decisions yet. I think it was pretty local, although once Barcelona, in Barcelona, we decided to do that, then this similar platform sprang up from activists in other cities who'd also been networked in, to those previous movements. So it was something that like spread pretty quickly after we'd taken the decision in Barcelona.
So it's kind of like a loose network, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, to me, this is fascinating, Kate. I appreciate the clarity and candor you have around, look, it was a loose network of people. We were getting shit done. We didn't really have a structure, but we knew we were at that point where some decisions had to get made, even though we didn't have a process or protocol to make decisions. And I want to point out to listeners, if you're on our podcast, if you're watching on the YouTube or the Rumble channel, just to remind folks, this is really how life happens, right? If you study any social movement history, you're going to find that there are people who are trying to make change. And when we look back at the American Revolution or the Civil Rights Movement or the women's suffrage movement or any movement, because we know how it goes, we can tell it in a story, and it's almost like a ballet, right? This happened, and then this happened, and then there was some dispute here, but then this happened. But in reality, if you're living it on the ground, it actually is convoluted and it's messy, and it's not clear exactly what to do, and people are doing their best, but they're so frustrating because they're humans, and humans are gonna human. And so I just want to point out that, to me, one of the lessons is we have to come together, collectivize to the best of our ability, and actually with a theoretical orientation, but then put some shit into practice. Try some things and then learn from that. Am I oversimplifying that? Because when you were telling that beginning story, I thought of, you were opportunistic. You saw some things. There was a culture. You acted on it, and then it kind of exploded.
Yeah, I mean, you need sometimes people to make decisions and test things out. And this is the other thing is, so this was the hypothesis, right? And the first phase of opening up to, beyond that initial kind of group that was driving it, was they set themselves the challenge of collecting, I think it was 30,000 signatures of support in the few months after. So they had the public presentation, which is where I kind of went along, curious to see what it was all about. And then it was okay, because we recognize that we're not legitimate to make this decision on behalf of the city, we're going to collect these signatures to see that there's enough of a critical mass of people who agree with us to really take this forward. So yeah, you can play with those kind of mechanisms too, to test your ideas.
So the other observation I had was, boy, you had a two-party system that most people found to be corrupt. You had institutional rot. Jack, I don't know about you, but boy, I saw a lot of similarities in the Barcelona context and what.
I recognize that. Yeah, but also what came out of it. The Occupy movement was, it was totally spontaneous. The fact that it just kind of took fire around the country and around the world was just, that was a surprise to everybody in New York, that's for sure. Definitely did not see any of that coming. So it's really interesting to hear a very similar kind of thing happening in Spain, where it sounds like it sounds to me from what you described, it was kind of focused in Barcelona, and then it kind of just exploded once people saw what was going on. They were like, I want to do that too. So, but what David, I love what you were just saying, because and just bring me back if I need to be brought back. But I have to say, one of the things that I'm really feeling so strongly right now, watching the candidacy of Cornel West, and also the conflict here in the United States right now, I'm seeing people who are focused online. They're so obsessed with what's happening online, and they get really caught up and sucked into this ideological discussion of minutia. And just these tiny ideas of what it means to be left and what it means to be a revolutionary and all this stuff. And what I love about what we're talking about here is this idea, just in this moment, is this idea of just having to move forward. What are we going to do? What's the action that we're going to take? Not how pure is our ideology or how solid is our understanding of theory, but like, regardless of what our differences are when it comes to these different ideas and policies, can we work together to move forward for an actual tangible goal? That's what I love about this. That's for me is really important.
Yeah, and on this point, I would like to emphasize, because for brevity, I've kind of shooted past it quite quickly, but like, it was not easy to get everyone on board, right? Because you had the Green Party, you had the Communists, you had Podemos, which was a new party at national level, you had the different activists, you had the neighborhood associations, and you had, you know, underlying that, like you say, all of these strategic and theoretical, you know, disagreements, and also all of the potential, you know, mistrust about people's agendas, and, you know, and that is not, like, it requires a lot of generosity, patience, tolerance of difference, and putting above all of that stuff, like finding the things that you share. Like, what do we don't agree about all of these 90 things, but what are the 10 things we all agree on? And like, that whole process, and having care with that process, and not like, when you're triggered, you know, by someone who's one of your allies, to like take a breath and have like really build that culture of, we called it confluence, which is this idea of everyone leaves their like hat at the door of like any previous organization they belong to, or, you know, their kind of labels, and we come together as neighbors. I'm not saying that was necessarily the reality all the time, but that was like the collective like myth that we were building, and we put the shared goals in the center. And building that culture was not immediate. Like, the initial agreement, I guess, between all the parties was quite fragile, but it's a culture that you can build through practice and through building that trust. And it's super important.
Kate, I so much appreciate this. And it reminds me of one of my mentors, in fact, a former guest on Redneck Gone Green, Jerome Scott, who has a long history of left organizing, community organizing, and he was a leader in the Revolutionary Union movement in the Detroit factory workers, doing wildcat strikes against both the racist white UAW leadership and, the auto bosses, right? Like, so, and one of the things that he, as a friend and a mentor and a colleague, always reminds me is, look, the importance of theory is so that you have an understanding of the world, not so that you can be a good movement Trivial Pursuit player, but so that you can have a grounding, right? And understanding that there's going to be disputes and debates always. And when the dispute or debate comes up, the important thing to do is, number one, be principled. Be willing to have discover where the agreement and disagreement is, right? So be principled, but also the end goal should always be, how is the most unity that we can have at the end of this dispute, whether it's personal or political, and still be in integrity. And to me, that framing around it, I found myself all of a sudden getting actually less concerned about whether somebody agrees with me or not, and how can I be principled and find the confluence that you're describing? And frankly, it's made me a much better organizer. And so I really think that it's not that we discount theory. It's not that we discount ideology. Actually, that's what drives and motivates us. But if we're trying to win, not just be right, then we have to have a level of not just political and emotional maturity, but downright humility, right? Like if this was easy to do, we would have already done it. And so I'm going to circle back again to Jack's really astute impression and excitement around y'all as unapologetic, like transformational revolutionaries were able to win an election in one of the major cities in Europe. That's a big fucking deal. And, so to me, I'd love to know a little bit about more in detail, like how did, once you went from, okay, we're making some decisions without much structure, did the structure come through the electoral effort? Did you figure out the structure first, then get involved in the elections? I mean, I'm really interested in how can we replicate that in the US?
Yeah, so so there was like during the campaign, after the public kind of presentation, there was a proto structure that was basically designed around winning the election, right? So there was a communications part, there was like a neighborhood kind of part, and there was like the policy part, the people who are writing our plan for, or coordinating the participation process for writing the manifesto. And our main strategy was getting out into public space, which I guess is not possible in all cities, but in Barcelona, there are public spaces, the weather's good. So we did a lot of like, you know, the photos, some of the photos looked like Occupy, you know, they were just huge kind of circular public meetings in the squares. And it was like an open mic system. So a couple of the representatives of Barcelona En Comú would go to the square, they'd kind of briefly explain the project, and then it would just be a listening exercise, and people could grab the mic, say what they, you know, what the problems were in the neighborhood, what they wanted, just express their general rage and frustration. And that way you got a lot of, you know, people walking by who maybe wouldn't have come to a political meeting if it wasn't on their doorstep. And then there was the online side as well. Obviously, back in those days, it was 2015. The social media landscape was different to how it was today. One of our main social media guys, Tourette, always says that, you know, back in 2015, the left still were like the Jedis of social media. We were still the ones who knew how to do it and who were organized. And now, like, the tables have been turned. But so, and part of the important thing as well was our alliance with the existing Green Party, because that's what gave us the right to stand for election, to get on the ballot. And it also gave us time, you know, right to participate in the TV debates. So that combination of, and of course the Ada Colau as a kind of spokesperson as well. So that combination of public space, online, and I guess mainstream media, but mostly, like, the more I look back on it, it was just the right time. It was the right time, and it was the right people. And you know, there's so many things that you know, it just wouldn't be possible even in Barcelona today, you know, to do it. We're just in a different moment. So yeah.
Yeah, you know, I remember, now that we're talking about it, you know, how excited I was when I saw it. It's fascinating to me because I feel like what you just described, what you did together, was you were attacking both the direct public involvement by engaging people in neighborhoods. I mean, you were doing hyper local listening sessions. But then what you're describing, and I didn't know about, was that you also had this kind of like this ballot access, or like an institutional like engagement through the Green Party there. So it was like you were doing both of these things at the same time. They kind of came together in such a way, which I think is probably a big part of the secret sauce, right? Now, and also speaks to what David opened up the show with, which was this idea that it can't just be one thing or another. It can't just be electoral fetishism, or it needs to be like, you know, organizing on the ground, you know, with direct action or what have you, right? It needs to be a combination of both. And that's what it sounds to me like, you know, was coming together in Barcelona and Spain at larger. Now, I do want to real quickly, if we can just kind of like take a quick look at the timeline, because I wanted to get back to that, because what we're just talking about now, and I know we're going to get back to the nuts and bolts of it all, and I'm excited about that. But what we're talking about now is really kind of more around the origin story. it kind of comes together as this, a movement, and then there's the indignados where this occupations are happening, and it transforms into this amazing electoral victory that takes place around the country. But there is more that goes on. So what happens after that? Because that was 2015. What continues to go on, and also what makes Barcelona unique in that situation?
Well, what happens? There's the political agenda in the city changes, and issues that were not even in the debate are now public policy. Particularly mass tourism, which had always been sold by the political and media and economic establishment as more tourism is better. Even though local residents were getting more and more priced out of their housing and more frustrated about the negative externalities of tourism. So then we started to have all of these policies to clamp down on Airbnb, to change the urban planning so that new hotels couldn't open, to have a moratorium on new tourist apartment licenses. That was one issue. Housing was another. So the issue of affordable housing was like one of our main flagship policies. And we had, even though, of course, city councils don't have a lot of the powers, right, over housing policy, but we used every power we had to do things like fining banks that had empty properties in the city unless they let them out at social rents. We had a new rule saying that 30% of all new housing had to be affordable. We did a big campaign for rent controls that finally, at the end of our second term, the national government passed a law about, allowing cities to control rents. And we started to build public housing also, which is another thing that public housing had only been sold off for decades. And we started a big program to build new public housing. And we also had a big green public space program. The most famous kind of part of that is called super blocks, which is about turning streets, just kind of reducing considerably vehicle access to streets and turning them into pedestrianized green areas, and you could see in the last election campaign, all of our opponents, they were all against, they were all supposedly very concerned about house prices and rent prices and affordable housing. They all wanted new green space. Maybe they weren't pro rent controls or pro the way we were doing it, but like the debate had changed. The debate was like, how can we make housing more affordable? How can we make more green space? How can we control the effects of tourism? And so like we were playing, like the terms of debate had shifted completely. And for me, that's one of the biggest achievements of our time in office, I guess.
So I love this idea of the super block, because I had remembered when it got translated here, it was called traffic calming. This idea that pedestrians were with municipal leadership. The Barcelona government was literally saying, okay, like we should not be serving the automobile, right? Like we should be serving people in our cities, and therefore redesigning it so we're like, okay, there's a space for cars, but we shouldn't prioritize cars. That's at least how it got translated here, Kate. And to me, what I loved about that was, oh, wow, I'm watching y'all do policies that actually not just like far lefties can get excited about and say, like, you make life better. Okay, here's more housing. Oh, and even getting more housing, we get parks where there used to be, nothing but these big thoroughfares. I mean, to me, that's what's so exciting. Like when people like us who share our values get into municipal government, we can actually govern differently, right? Like we can make people's lives different. We don't have to wait until we control the entire state apparatus. we can make what we call the non-reformist reforms. Like, you make reforms, you make people's lives better. Yes, we want to go as far and deep as we can, but we're going to take the steps that we can. And here's the kick, Kate, without ever being satisfied with just the reform, right? Because if you do that, then you'll never ultimately address the predatory class who have constructed this shitty society where, you know, people are hungry and not fed. So I'm wondering, Jack, can you throw us up an image on a super block? Because I think that I'd love for folks who are watching us on YouTube or Rumble to literally get a sense of what those look like. Because to me, I think that is an amazing look at what it actually looks like and means. So while Jack does that, my apologies for catching you, Jack, as producer and co-host. It's unfair to you. So walk us through what we're looking at here, if you know any of these images.
Well, basically how it works is there's a large part of Barcelona is on a grid system, right? So if you basically cut off traffic, because you can have like delivery vehicles can go through at 10 kilometers an hour, right? At certain times of day, but basically it's pedestrianized. And if you cut off 4 of those, like a crossroad, what do you create in the cross is like a new public square. So
check it out. Like, for those of you, and if you're only on podcast, this is an encouragement for you to subscribe to YouTube or Rumble so you can see this amazing image. Kate, like, show us, like, in that quadrant, like, that's a park that wasn't there before.
Yeah, because then you can, because there aren't cars going through it, you can plant trees and put like kids play areas, and in fact that's an important part of the planning of each super block was participation with local residents and businesses about what they wanted to put in those new spaces, because sometimes it was green, sometimes it was benches, sometimes it was like chessboards. There's what in one they've got chessboards or ping pong, or, you know, whatever it is that the people who live around there want in that new space.
And there's a photo credit, Jack, one more, because I just think a photographer, Anna Beltri, had a photograph that actually zooms in on what was once an actual auto thoroughfare. And like, so because we've looked at the big overview and you've like laid it out, but when you zoom in on this, it's an amazing look. And Jack, if you've got that handy, if you just scroll down on the screen, you'll see it.
I think what you were saying before is really important about having tangible improvements in people's lives. And that's one of the things that makes, that's the one in my neighborhood. Yeah.
Oh, how fun.
So yeah, like things that people can see and touch and be involved in. And because also they're the people who are going to defend like the policy, right? When other people, when you're no longer in government. For example, just yesterday, a court ruled, because one of the things we have, which I'm sure you're familiar with in the States, is our policies being challenged in the courts by economic interests. And yesterday there was a ruling saying that one of our super blocks was not legally, supposedly, done, and so it has to be dismantled and undone. But just the reaction yesterday from the people who live there and from people in the city was like, no way, right? So even if they come with the diggers to dig it up, I think they'll have the neighbors there tied to the trees to stop them doing it, right? That's how you can make things sustainable.
Folks, you're listening to Redneck Gone Green, or you're watching it. But in any case, I am your host, David Cobb. I am the Redneck, and I have gone green, and I hope you will too. We're talking to Kate, who is really a brilliant theorist, thinker, and doer of the municipalist strategy and her experiences in Barcelona. Jack, you have a question or a prompt.
Sorry, David, you caught me off guard. I was just taking a look at this other really awesome image here that I just wanted to share.
Well,
This is just so gorgeous. It's like so lovely. And I mean, I don't know if I can, I feel like I should let you take over, David, because like my head is, I'm just going into like lefty fantasy land. I'm going into like, I just want to go move to Barcelona and spread it everywhere in the world, because it's just such I love just the idea of like, I mean, come on, right? I mean, just the idea of like having people getting together and be like, you know what, we're just going to create our spaces that are centered around humans, not around commerce or cars. Just even like a little hint of that is just, oh my goodness, what a lovely idea. I just can't help it. I'm like, make it.
Oh, and they're good for commerce. Like for local businesses, they get more sales when people can walk past, when people enjoy walking down that street, right? And you're a butcher on that street, or you have a shoe shop. So although there was a lot of controversy about this is going to just, people aren't going to shop here, quite the opposite.
And Kate, it's interesting, the folks at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance here in the States, the data is actually quite clear. Traffic calming actually ends up being good, and get this, for local merchants. And one of the things that I think that we've got to really grapple with is to convince local business owners who think that they're on the side of the Chamber of Commerce or, sort of right-wing business economic interest, that it's actually not true. Like Main Street, not Wall Street. That's the slogan that I try to help people with. And it's on that tip that I want to go into the next question, and that is, how do you deal with requests from the public that seem on its face to be counter to your principles? How do you deal with like these merchants that you want on your side saying, stop, stop, stop? Like, how do you handle that tension?
Well, in that particular case, I guess part of it is listening to their concerns and trying to integrate them into that design process, because yes, like those businesses do need a delivery truck to come through in the morning every day. Like, yeah, okay, maybe we can work with that. And then also this kind of the first super block was the one that was in my neighborhood in Poblenou, and it was done through what they call tactical urbanism, with very, very cheap, right, just like a paint on the ground and just new kind of rules. And you make the mistakes, right? And then when you roll it out to the next neighborhood, you don't make the same mistakes because you've done it before, and you can say, look, actually in the end, the effect here was positive for local businesses, and you can build that way. But I think on the question more generally, I think one of the, I guess, for all of the radical potential of local politics, which I do think there is a lot, there's also the very prosaic side, which is, what do you do when the massive like residents in your city is not crying out for I don't know, pedestrianization or public housing, but they're saying that the most important issue in the city is that the streets aren't clean enough, or that there's too much crime, or things that, like, I mean, maybe it's true. Maybe there's a media campaign that's saying that the city is crime ridden ever since there was a housing activist being the mayor. Maybe the city is a bit dirty because it's a very densely populated Mediterranean city where it doesn't rain so much, and so however much you, and lots of dogs, so however much you clean it, there's always going to be some dirt. I don't know, but the point is that when you have polls showing that people are worried about crime and cleaning, and when you have a relentless media campaign saying that the city is filthy and crime-ridden, whatever the truth of that, politically, if you don't deal with it, you're not going to win the next election. And that is, it can be pretty frustrating, right? Because you want to be talking about housing, or you want to be talking about climate change, or whatever, but you have to increase your street cleaning budget, and you have to, support your local police, and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's one of the challenges, because you can't run away from those things when they're, people in the end. There are a lot of people who just want to walk out of their front door and not see rubbish on the floor or trash, whatever you call it.
Yeah, and I feel like this kind of segues into a couple of different concerns that I had that I really wanted to check in with you about and learn from you about, which is the bad guys and the bad guys coming in and doing everything they can to undermine this, radical, not radical. It's a different way of approaching that centers people and centers people's needs, right? And is more democratic and putting people first. And but when I say the bad guys, I'm talking about these institutions, these legacy like institutions that are there, the financial industry, like I
can tell you who they are if you want.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would like to know a couple things. One is, how did you approach that? How were you dealing with those attacks? Because like you said, you need to deal with them. You need to deal with them politically. You can't just ignore them. You can't ignore what's coming from the request from the public and the way that those may be strategically amplified by your political opponents. And another thing that I need to point out is that, how would you deal? Well, actually, let me just ask this. How would you deal with an attacks such as the reason that these bad things are happening are because of those lefty policies, those radical policies coming from this new government? What was that response that you have?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I can't continue without saying that our biggest baddie was the private water company in the city, because one of our main policies was the remunicipalization of the water company, which had been privatized by the previous mayor under very dubious conditions and circumstances, and was actually struck down by the courts, opening the potential of getting it back right under public control. And this is Agbar, it's called. It's part of the French multinational, I think it's called Swiss, but it's like a huge multinational of private water companies. And they, as soon as we won the election, they set up all of these like online news sites that were basically just designed just to attack us, and just spewed out fake news the whole time. And they set up fake local social movements as well to to kind of do this, what do they call it, astroturfing against us. They took us to court many times as well. They challenged in the courts. We wanted to bring in this new citizen initiative so that citizens could propose like citywide votes on different issues. And they took that to court because we wanted to use it to have a vote on the water privatization. So it was, they were behind almost every attack against us on any issue, not just water. They were behind it, or had some involvement. And I think it's not just about, in those kind of situations, it's not even just about Barcelona, right? Or that particular policy. It's about setting an example, and it's about because precedents are dangerous, right? So they wanted to destroy us because they didn't want us to set any kind of precedent. For me, the most dangerous attacks are those ones that play on legitimate concerns and fears that we were talking about. The other ones are like just the lies, but the fact that it's like, one of the things I mentioned before was about our code of ethics, right? But by the time the third election came round, I think in the first election, this idea of like, these politicians are not going to stay in power for 30 years. They're not going to earn way more than the average wage. They're going to be transparent. They're going to do things differently in like a non-corrupt way. was like a big electoral selling point for us. By year 3, I don't think anyone believed anymore that we were obeying our own code of ethics. We were, but there'd been so many fake news stories saying that, saying that we weren't, or implying corrupt practices, or like just lies about our integrity to say that we were the same as everyone else, that I think by term 3, that had literally no political value, electorally anyway. And the other thing is, the other complication is the issue of like different, like the US, Spain has at least 3 or 4 levels of government in any particular area, and the responsibilities are shared. So particularly on the issue of crime, for example, there was a rise in certain types of crime in Barcelona in over a couple of years of our being in office. But actually, crime and policing are a responsibility primarily of the Catalan government, the regional government. But people don't know that. And if all of the media is attacking the mayor and not the president of Catalonia, and then you can't even do anything about it because you have your local city police just do like traffic controls. I'm not offering really the solutions to this. I'm just adding more and more complexities to it. But it's not easy to. Well, they won in the end because we lost the election, right? And I think largely because
we're coming to the end of our time together. This hour has flown by. So I do, and I appreciate the clarity and the candor. Like, here's the great thing that happened. We were growing, but I like to joke, the empire always strikes back, right? Like, there has never been a social movement where the predatory class says, oh, look, y'all finally got it together and are working together. Here's the keys to the kingdom, right? Like, they always double down. Like, there are some folks who are confused, and when they see it, oh yeah, I'll go along with it. But the true predatory class, and not the ruling elite, because they're not better than us, the predatory class, the billionaire class, the folks who have seized the public water supply and are literally commodifying one of the basic human needs. These are bad actors, right? Like, let's be clear about this. These are our class enemies. So I appreciate that you're adding complexity, but I do want to say, like, as you're thinking about it, Kate, what are you thinking about? Oh, well, like, what could we do differently? How do we navigate this? Because they're gonna lie on us. They always lie on us like that. Like, like, how do you think, as I look back, again, not that like, if we had done that, we would have won, but what were some of the mistakes that you made that you think we could have at least corrected?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things we did that I'm sure helped to hold some of that back was Ada invented this new type of public meeting called meetings with the mayor in the neighborhoods, because although there are a lot of like formal, there's like the city council meeting every month, or there's like the formal participation mechanisms. Most people, firstly, they want to speak to the mayor. They don't want to go to like their district council office and fill in a form. And also they're, hearing all of this, all of this noise and all of these lies and manipulations and stuff. So Ada was like, I need to get out there and just talk to people directly. And so, I think it was once a month, or the frequency might have changed, but it would be announced in a certain neighborhood that she would be having an evening of talking to local people. No order of the, I can't speak English anymore. No running order, like no, just an open, like we've done in campaign a bit, just like an open mic where she would listen to people and, explain those complexities that in a mainstream media interview, either they're not going to ask you about that issue, or they're not going to give you the time and the space to say, like, this is what's happening. This is why, things are the way they are, or this is, or change things because, okay, I've heard this from you and now I'm going to change what we're doing. So that direct contact. And I think that's the other thing about local politics is, for me, the only way to get past all of like both the mainstream media campaigns and the online stuff is direct face-to-face contact. And actually, in our second election campaign, we worked with people from the US to bring door-to-door canvassing to Barcelona, because it's something there's no kind of history of here. It's not a way people campaigned. And we realized that actually, for us, it would be really important to be able to go to people's front doors and just talk to them directly and, you know, try and fight back against some of those campaigns against us.
And that was for the second campaign, Kate?
Yeah, that was 2019. I think personally that in the 2023 election, we kind of rolled back on that, on the door-to-door, which I think was a mistake, quite frankly, because if you don't replace it with something else, right, that's direct contact. So yeah, I think at a city level, you can use those face-to-face, you know, word of mouth type of networks to fight back against these bad actors in a way that you would never be able to do at a state or national level. So yeah, I think the other thing is like what I was saying before about the code of ethics and how it got kind of what's the word?
Co-opted,
exactly,
diminished.
kind of, yeah, undermined. I think we probably were too relaxed about that. We were like, you know, we're doing it and it's true and it's, you know, but we didn't, after the first campaign, we should probably have been constantly reminding people. I mean, I know you don't want to be talking about yourself all the time, right? You want to be talking about the issues people care about, but like made more of an effort to keep reinforcing that idea of, you know, we are earning a lower wage, we're giving the extra money to social causes. The problem is, even when we did that, you know, it was hard to, we didn't get much coverage for it. But I think like at least not losing ground, right? Not allowing the things that the messages you've got out there that are positive and people like, not kind of sitting on your laurels and thinking, oh yeah, people know that we're not taking like expense claims like the other politicians are or whatever. Because if you know, because we're responsible, like politically, you know, engaged people, we want to focus on the policy and all the rest. And so then you take your eye off that ball and then you turn around a few years later and no one believes that you're doing ethical politics because you haven't been talking about it, right?
So Kate, thank you so much for this, because again, like clarity on, oh, okay, here are some mistakes we made and how at least that mistake we could have addressed. And one of the things, like, kudos to be bringing in the notion of canvassing, and it gives me the opportunity to share with viewers, listeners, and everyone the difference between deep canvassing and mere traditional GOTV, or get out the vote, canvassing. And this is where you invest the time and energy into genuine relationships at the door, right? Almost all traditional electoral campaigns will teach you, and I know because I was taught this way and I was guilty of doing it. You just get in, find out who your ones are. These are the people who are going to definitely vote for you. You get that one and then you move on to the next one because you're just trying to, again, this is the electoral fetishism, right? And it's all about making sure you get the numbers. And then if you've like, but the deep canvassing is like, no, actually, you take as much time as it takes to really hear from people what their concerns are, what their dreams are, what their aspirations are. You ask more open-ended questions. And it comes out of, in California, I'll just do it real quick because it's important. Almost all canvassing in electoral politics had been this traditional voter ID type. When California lost the marriage equality, or the ability for homosexual or bisexual same-sex couples to marry, we thought we were going to win California. And the folks who ran that campaign did a real honest assessment, like, what mistakes did we make? And that was one of the things that they came to, that included an acknowledgement, a self-critique, you know, good critique, self-critique. Oh, we tried to keep the most obvious homosexual people out of like the traditional communities, because we didn't want to provoke them, right? And what they came to was, actually we need to spend the time humanizing and like having people see these things, and it takes a lot longer to do. But when you build genuine relationships, it matters. And what the data is showing, it's a big upfront investment of time and energy and money. But when you do, you end up having more successful electoral campaigns anyway. So I just think that this is a really important point. It's not like there is magic to this, so much as, well, it is magic, right? Because humans are wonderful, precious creatures, right? But if you figure out how to build authentic relationships, then you end up having more successful social movements and more successful elections. I'm wondering if that resonates with you, Kate, or if that was part of the experience in Barcelona.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, the door to door, although I'd say it's we probably did somewhere in between what you said. We had the ones and that, but as a listening exercise, for me, it was really transformative to really understand, for me to also humanize people who were critical of us and to understand where they were coming from. And and again, I just think that the smaller scale of municipal politics is what really allows you to do that with an electoral impact, because you can do it at a larger level, but like, I don't know the level of if you'd have the manpower to really do it at a level that was bigger than that successfully.
Well, folks, this conversation just flew by. Kate, I hope that you'll come back and join us. We do a weekly show. It's a video podcast. It's a podcast. It's audio, etc. We also run a Substack writing, and this is a reminder to listeners, viewers, readers: subscribe to us at Redneck Gone Green on our Substack. Subscribe on YouTube, on Rumble. We are building an audience. I do want to give you an opportunity, Kate, for any final thoughts before we wrap up.
I guess my final thought would just be that we've proved that it can be done. We've proved that if people get together and want to take back their city and run it in another way, it is possible. And even just that as a message, I hope will give people, inspire people in other cities to try and do the same.
Well, I think we'll wrap on that note, Kate, and that is that Barcelona shows us that it can be done, and also that it's not easy, but you can't stop, won't stop. Folks, thank you so much for joining us here on Redneck Gone Green. I want to thank Kate Shea-Baird for being our guest. I want to thank Jack Rabbit for being the producer and co-host on this show. So Jack, thank you so much. Kate, thank you. And remember, folks, can't stop, won't stop. Getting larger, stronger, better organized every day. We're going to win. Peace.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.